I take photography and videography as a hobby, probably a little too seriously, but I try to do the best I can. I think it maybe started with some of my other hobby, which was flying as a private pilot and trying to capture some of the places I went and things that I did there. Flying as a private pilot is kind of the ultimate freedom. So I got interested in it really young when I was in high school. And then right after high school, I got my student license, kind of flew all around western Colorado, which is, of course, a very scenic place to fly around. As soon as I could, I went off, got my private pilot's license, started traveling all around the western United States. Not too long after that, bought my first airplane, and I've kind of had a series of airplanes and spots to fly ever since that. The reason I like flying is very visual, so it's another perspective of our world. So I just love to do that, to cruise along and see the world from another dimension. Flying's been a big part of my marriage with Antoinette. First date I took her flying, and on our honeymoon I took her flying to Mexico. She'd never been to Mexico before, so she got to learn about flying in Mexico and ultimately fell in love with that.
I was thoroughly impressed. And then the topper was when we took off. It was late in the day, and I looked out and I could see the sun setting. And it was just tremendous, the whole thing. And at the end of it, I said, you are such a remarkable person.
I grew up on a small farm in Colorado. It was a great place to grow up. Again, the idea of freedom. Western Colorado at that time had not much population, not a lot of fences, and people worried about keeping you out. As a kid, that was freedom. Of course, the farm, everybody has to work because it's a family endeavor. This was fairly dry country, so we had irrigation coming from the Colorado River. We had to dig the irrigation ditches, and in my case, it was for cleaning them out every spring. So that's pretty hard work. So, to some extent, where you grow up and how you grow up maybe defines your view of life and who you are. Because of that kind of remote location, I end up being pretty self-reliant. I have the feeling that gave me kind of both the confidence and the self-reliance that I've had most of my life.
At that time and the era that he grew up, it was an era of hope and possibilities. What gave him that inspiration was the love and support of his family. They are the foundations of his life and his soul. Charles would hear his dad express to him, "You can do anything. You have this ability inside of you to achieve what you dream." And he was a dreamer. And in this environment, his parents let him thrive. It was early March of '83. And he said to me, Antoinette, I have an idea for something.
I had a career with the DuPont company, changed jobs and gone to this small company called UVP, or Ultraviolet Products. And we did all kinds of applications around ultraviolet technology. That came to mind when I thought about these thin pieces of plastic. I said, is there some way we could make a whole stack of them, change the shape, and make layers and form a prototype part out of plastic? So then, of course, I had to start inventing how would you really do that.
He was so diligent and so determined. He had this vision because he could see the problem. And I think for him, this is just part of his soul. He's such a risk taker, and he would analyze the situation and figure out a way.
I'd been working on this 3D printer stereolithography system for months and months, evenings, weekends, and I couldn't quite ever get it to work. I mean, there were a lot of elements. There was, the the light source, to trying different chemicals. And finally, one evening I was staying late and got it to work and actually printed all the way through the first part, printed it first. I was pretty excited. I called Antoinette and said, get down to the lab.
I opened the door to the engineering department, and he said, "I did it, Antoinette. I cracked the code. And the world as we know it will never be the same. It's a contrivance that the world never knew about until Charles William Hull invented it on November 10th, 1983. It's a world where innovation and compassion come together to create miracles."
Once the part popped out and, hey, we say this is going to work, then it was time to start putting the patent application together. And so I started thinking of names and finally ended up with the name stereolithography, where stereo is kind of Greek for solid or 3 dimensions. And of course, lithography is printing. The way it works is that you can take a CAD design, a computer-aided design, and slice it into a whole set of cross-sections, a stacked set of cross-sections. Take each of those cross-sections, start with the first one, print it 2-dimensionally in the printer, move the vertical stage 1 layer thickness, have new material there, print that layer, and just keep layer after layer after layer, building all the cross-sections of a part until finally when you're finished you have the part that's the same as you designed in that 3-dimensional CAD system. As you go along being an engineer, you aren't necessarily an entrepreneur. How you start and grow an enterprise, entrepreneurship, is not necessarily a thing you're thinking about. But I had gone through the process of inventing 3D printing, the early stages, and the president of the company was not a great supporter of that. And so I started thinking that as time passed, I might need to have some entrepreneurship knowledge. Entrepreneurship is really a team sport. The idea was that an engineer could design a new part that he wanted to prototype on a 3D CAD, send the data from that 3D CAD to the 3D printer and print the part. But when I talked to all the CAD companies, the 3D CAD companies, they didn't have any way to do that. So I hired a computer graphics team to address that. And ultimately, we all developed what we called a neutral file format. So this is a format that was pretty easy to take the CAD data and move it to that format, and then very compatible with what we needed for 3D printing. So it was easy for us to slice it mathematically and then fill it with whatever fill we needed for the print. So we called that the STL format.
Chuck invented the field, but his passion for inventing and being hands-on in the lab, working with engineers and other inventors, has made his career about inventing more platforms, more technology in this field than any other individual.
Well, it's touched every industry. I can't imagine one that it hasn't touched. 3D printing, not specifically stereolithography, but 3D printing just generally, it went from the point where it was an amazing surprise when people saw it to something that became useful, something that became expected. Everybody knows about it, everybody uses it, everybody knows how to use it, to something that's pretty ubiquitous. So it's it spanned just a huge amount of industry and the expectations of people and especially engineers.
3D printing enables the freedom to invent. People with 3D printing constantly invent new solutions to their problems. It's just the idea that now people with 3D printers can do things themselves, kind of an amazing movement in itself.
When you affect somebody's life, that's a big deal. And we've been in healthcare for a long time, but then when you get into regenerative medicine, that's certainly going to be the next frontier.
The whole field of medical applications took on its own life. So that's, to me, one of the most interesting applications that I had never thought of when, back at UVP creating this, but it evolved out of the technology. We had a couple of graduate students from Stanford that came to our company with the idea of printing dental aligners that would align teeth. Instead of having wires and braces in their mouth, they would wear basically a plastic part that pushed their teeth into place. So Align technology, the Invisalign aligner, there's probably more of those aligners printed per day than all the other 3D printed parts combined. I think I've heard they print something like 1 million parts a day.
What I've learned in this business is anatomy matters. People want things that fit them, and people are unique. And aligners are a great example. It's really changed people's ability to change their teeth, get them straightened, and do it in a way that's not painful and disruptive to their lives. Invention is an opportunistic sport. So when you have that idea, you have to capture it, and you have to execute on it, and you have to move it forward a little bit, and then it builds from there.
Chuck always finds a way. He sees through these storms. It can be raining here with a problem and raining here and we don't see it. He goes right through and he sees the answer and he never gives up. If it's going to benefit humanity, there's nothing going to stop him. Nothing.
Having been working in the field of inventing things, so my view is most things have not been invented yet. So there's just tremendous opportunities for innovation. Probably could have retired a long time ago. But of course it's so interesting and there's always so many things just on the horizon to do that it seems like almost impossible to not do it.